Hello. Welcome back to Steins Gate Zero. Oh, okay, Kagari, let's go shopping. To Kagari, Mary must have felt like a star shining in a world of darkness and mud. A star shining brighter than anything else in the night sky.
別に大した話じゃないさ。大好きなおばあさんが亡くなってずっと悲しんでたあいつが今にも消えてしまいそうで、それで口から出た痛々しいセリフだ。
お前は俺の人質だって。
Hearing it from another person made me so embarrassed that I wanted to go hide.
若かったんだ。若さゆえの過ちというやつさ。
それでもその言葉はママを救ってくれたんだよね。
どうだろうな。
If those words meant that I was holding her back, even all the way into the future.
オカリンさん、
そんなことより腹が減らないか。何か食べにでも行こう。
I started walking ahead in an effort to change the subject. Kagari seemed hesitant as she tried to keep up.
何か食べたいものあるか。
私は何でもいいかな。
そういうのが一番困るんだ。
だってこの時代の食べ物って何でも美味しいんだもん。びっくりするくらい。
未来じゃ何を食べてたんだ。
お芋とかそういうのばっかりかな。あ、でもママが毎日違う味付けしてくれてたから。
まゆりが？
うん。
まゆりの料理はそのうまかったのか？そうか。
The human animal is capable of growth, it seemed. Well, Yuki had been teaching her a lot lately. Maybe that had paid off.
だから私は何でもいいよ。
Alright then.
お帰りになさいませ、ご主人様。あ、おかえり。それにかがりにゃんも。
Thank you. I'd chosen to stop by May Queen Unsquared and Biddy.
そうなのにゃん。今日からアニメとのタイアップキャンペーンが始まったのにゃん。
Thank you for the welcome. Come to think of it, there was a sign out front with some anime characters on it. I've seen those characters all over town.
おかげで大繁盛で満席なのにゃん。30分くらい待ってもらったら入れるようになるんやけど。
そういうことならまた今度にするよな。
もっとゆっくりできそうな時に出直してくるね。せっかく来てもらったのにごめんにゃ。
We left May Queen Unsquared and walked around for a bit, but it was lunchtime and every place we saw was crowded.
どこも人だらけ。
まったくだ。わざわざ外で飯なんか食わずに家で済ませればいいもの。
でもそれって私たちにも当てはまるよね。
Now then, what to do?
ラボで食べよっか。
言っとくが、俺は料理なんてできないぞ。
私も。
Then that was out of the question.
簡単なものでいいよ。あ、私あれ食べてみたかったんだ。ほら、お湯かけて食べるヌードル的なの。
カップ麺か？あんなものでいいのか？
未来だとね、工場がいっぱいなくなっちゃってなかなか手に入らなくなっちゃったんだ。ダルおじさんがいつも食べたいって言ってて、ずっと気になってたの。
If she was okay with that, so was I. And I had just the thing. We bought a lot of instant noodles at the local convenience store. If there were any left, Dara would probably eat them.
すっごいね。カップ麺ってあんなにいっぱい種類あるんだ。
今は未来と違って飽食の時代だからな。コンビニなんかでは毎週のように新商品が出る。
そうなんだね。ね、この中のどれを食べてもいいの？
Kagari looked inside the plastic bag I was holding.
もちろん。好きなのを選んでくれ。
それじゃあどれにしよっかな。
She looked just like a child, the way she put her finger to her lips as her eyes shone.
私これにする。塩味の。
なんなら2つでも3つでも食べてもいいぞ。
本当？で すぎちゃうと太っちゃうしな。
She had so many different expressions that I never got tired of watching them.
そういえばさっき他にも何か買ってたみたいだったけど。
ああ、これだよ。
Oh, I took something plastic out of the bag.
フォークだよ。箸じゃ食べづらいんじゃないかと思って。
Little bunny
自分
fork.
専用のものにしてラボに置いておけばいい。
いいの？もらっちゃって。
別に大したものじゃない。
Kurisu had always wanted her own fork. I knew this didn't make up for anything. I just wanted to do it.
やった、ありがとう。実はね、私お箸使うの苦手なんだ。ママからもいつも注意されてて。あ、これ先っぽにウサギさんがついてる。かわいい。えへへ。私専用のフォーク。私のもの、これで2つ目だ。
Oh, there must have been the keychain that Mayuri gave her.
でもなんでかな、私これずっと欲しかったような気がする。もしかしてこれもクリスさんの記憶なのかな。
さあ、どうだろうな。
ねえオカリンさん、オカリンさんはクリスさんのことを好きだったんでしょ？
I almost choked at the unexpected change in the direction of the conversation.
大丈夫？
いきなりなんでそうなる？
だって大切な人っていうのはそういうことでしょ？
あ、
で、どうなの？好きだったの？
She seemed genuinely interested. I guess she was the right age for that.
まあ、あいつとの出会いが俺の人生を大きく変えたのは確かだな。
ああ、ごまかした。ずるい。でも人生を変えるほどの大切な人か。なんか憧れるかも。
She changed everything, past and future.
オカリンさんから見てマキセ・クリスさんってどんな人だったの？
気になるか？
自分の頭の中にある記憶の持ち主のこともっと知りたいよ。
俺が教えなくてもそれこそ記憶として頭の中にあるんじゃないのか？
それが自分で思い出そうとしても思い出せないんだよね。時々断片的に出てくるだけで、それも大抵難しいことばかりだから、もっと人間的な部分っていうの、そういう人となりとか教えてほしいなって。
Kagari had never actually met Kurisu, had she? If she was sharing the memories of someone she'd never met, it would make sense if she wanted to know more about her.
あいつはマキセイ・クリスはとにかく好奇心の強いやつだったよ。
ふむふむ。
その上頑固で、自分が正しいと思ったことは誰に何を言われても決して曲げることはなかった。
そうなんだ。
不遜で強がりで、そのくせ寂しがり屋で。
The memories of all the conversations I had with Kurisu and everything I'd gone through with her came flooding back into my mind. I talked to her here just like this once before, come to think of it. Not in this world line though.
怒ると怖かった。
怖い？どんな風に？
回答して海馬に電極ぶっ刺すなんて物騒なこと言われたりしたよ。
And then for some reason she ran a few steps forward and spun around. And then
そんなこと言ってると回答して海馬に電極ぶっ刺すわよ。今すぐ回答して海馬に電極ぶっ刺してやろうかしら。
Kurisu.
なんてこんな感じ？オカリンさん？
あ、いや、
The memories of Kurisu inside Kagari. If they could be perfectly replicated inside Kagari's head, would Kagari Shino become Kurisu Makise? It was a stupid idea. Personality and memories were different things, but even so, if her memories turned into Kurisu's completely, if that happened.
オカリンさん
Oh. Kagari wandered back up to me and put her weight against me. It was so sudden I caught my breath. I could feel her warmth on my chest, the feeling of her skin. It reminded me of Kurisu. She's older than him and shorter than him too. The sound of her pain moan brought me back to reality.
どうしたかがり頭が痛いのか
Kagari's body twitched in my arms.
やだもうあんなとこ帰りたくない助けて誰かここから出して
どうしたんだかがり
助けてママどうして助けてくれないの
What the? She's doing this in public here? I grabbed her hands to keep her from struggling anymore. Nothing to see here. The people on the street were staring at me, but I didn't have time to think about it.
大丈夫だから
オカリンさん
歩けるかとにかくラボに戻ろう
She finally calmed down, but seemed to still be in pain. I let her lean on my shoulder as I took her back to the lab. Once we got back, she went to sleep and didn't wake up. Oh no, are you okay? Her headache seemed to have calmed down, but sometimes she would still moan. I contacted Mary and others, and they were probably going to arrive soon, but the words she said before...
助けて誰かここから出して助けてママどうして助けてくれないのママ
What was that? Were those fragments of her lost memories? If that was the case, then she really was. Just as I went to look at the clock, the door opened and Mayuri and Lukako came running in.
かがりさん大丈夫なんですか
ああ今はよく眠っている
よかった
She must have heard us talking because Kagari's eyes slowly opened.
かがりさんあれここどこ
She looked around,
落
afraid.
ち着いてここはラボですよラボ日本そうだよ日本の秋葉原だよ日本私日本にああそっか私交換留学でそういえば公演の準備は留学様子が変ですねえおかり
Exchange program, lecture. Those were Kurisu's memories.
あれ論文はパパに見てもらおうと思って頑張って書いたんだけど
落ち着けかがりそれは君の記憶じゃない
Kagari looked up at me in a daze.
オカリンさん
そうお前は椎名かがりだ牧瀬クリスじゃない
かがり私は椎名かがり
ルカ子
Uh,
悪いがかがりのことを頼む
はい
Kagari was confused for a while after that, but she gradually started to calm down again. Once it seemed safe to do so, I'd taken her back to Yanabayashi Shrine. But maybe we weren't going to be able to look after Kagari ourselves after all. Maybe we should take her to a hospital. Was it my ego that was stopping me from doing so? I kept thinking about that as I walked along.
今日はマユシーも一緒に泊まることにするね。
ああ、そうしてもらえると助かる。
It would make Kagari feel a lot better.
なるべく普段と同じように接してやってくれ。
わかった。
I told her to contact me right away if anything came up, then headed back to the lab.
カガリ、ひどいの？
That was the first thing Suzuha said to me when I walked through the door. She and Maho were sitting on the sofa. I told them about the situation already via Ryan, but they were still worried anyway, probably.
今は落ち着いてるが、一時はかなり混乱していた。
やっぱりクリスの記憶？
ああ、ここまで来るともう間違いないだろう。
I still didn't know why, but inside Kagari's mind were Kurisu Makise's memories. The question was how to deal with this problem. There were limits to what we could do on our own. The most we could hope to do was figure out how this had happened. That wouldn't be a real solution. To really fix this, we needed to get her back to normal, to erase Kurisu's memories and restore the original Kagari. And for that, we needed the help of a specialist. Maho Hiajo was a specialist in that sense. There was nobody else who knew as much about memories and the workings of the brain. But there was a problem. We still hadn't told her that Kagari was from the future. In this world line, Maho didn't know Suzuha and the others that well. Of course, she didn't know about the future or the time machine. Was it okay to tell her?
ねえ、あなたたちはカガリさんとはどうやって知り合ったの？漆原さんのところに来る前は彼女はどこで何をしていたのかしら？カガリは千葉の県境で倒れていたところを助けられたんだ。意識を取り戻した時点でそれ以前の記憶はなかった。
That was the same as the last world line.
でも子供の頃の記憶はあるんでしょ？鈴葉さんは彼女と知り合いだったのよね。子供の頃の彼女はどこで何をしていたの？
Suzuha looked at me silently. She felt responsible for what Kagari was going through right now, probably. I could see on her face that she wanted to bring back the old Kagari somehow.
おじさん、どうする？ヒヤジョーさんに話しても。
Maho was a scientist. If we told her the truth, she'd be sure to take an interest in time travel. She might start working on a time machine. This was a big risk, but...
カガリを救う方法を突き止めるためにはやむを得ないか。
I thought for a moment, then nodded. My priority right now was helping Kagari. Suzuha nodded back and then turned to face Maho.
今から話すことを知っているのはごく一部の人間しかいない。だからヒヤジョーさんも決して他の誰かに漏らしたりはしないで。なんなの急に。
Maho seemed overwhelmed by the sudden chill emanating from Suzuha, but Suzuha kept talking.
冗談に聞こえるかもしれないけど、冗談なんかじゃないんだ。約束できるか否か。答えは2つに1つだ。
Maho looked at me hesitant, but she must have seen something in my face.
わかったわ。誰にも言わない。約束する。
She nodded.
それじゃあ、まずはさっきの質問の答え。子供の頃、私とカガリがどこで何をしていたか。私たちは第三次世界大戦が終わった後の未だ各地で内戦が続く戦時下に暮らしていた。2036年のね。
Maho's mouth hung open for a second, but soon her cheeks flushed with anger.
からかわないで。人が真剣に聞いてるのに。
Suzuha remained silent. Her eyes were ice cold and staring straight into Maho's.
ヒヤジョーさん、鈴葉が最初に忠告したはずだ。これは作り話でも冗談でもない。鈴葉とカガリは25年後の未来からやってきた存在なんだ。 タイムマシンでな。
タイムマシン、そんなものが作れるわけが。
その理論の大元を作ったのがマキセ・クリスだと言ってもか。
The second I said Kurisu's name, the anger vanished from her face.
分かった。聞くだけは聞くわ。
Suzu and I told her almost everything. How I met Kurisu, about the D-mails, what happened in the Alpha World line, the development of the time machine, Mayuri's death, attractor field theory, what happened in 2036, what was going on with Kagari. The one thing I didn't tell her was the truth about Kurisu's death.
とりあえず話を整理させて。つまり鈴葉さんとかがりさんは岡部さんに未来を変えてもらうために2036年からやってきたと、そういうのね。そうだよ。
Maho sank into the sofa and sighed.
岡部さんにそんな大層なことができるとは思えないわ。たった一人の人間に全人類の命運がかかっているなんて。
俺だって無理だと思っている。
I'd given up, actually, on the entire future.
到底信じられない話ではある。あるけど、でもあなたの言ったその理論なら確かにタイムリープは可能かもしれない。それに何よりその理論の元を作ったのはクリスなんでしょ。だったら検証に値するわ。だってあの子は天才だもの。
Her words together seemed like a mixture of admiration, jealousy, and envy.
その代わり今度見せてほしいわね。そのタイムマシンを。乗ってきたって言うならあるんでしょ、どこかに。ある。すぐ近くにね。検証作業は必要だけど、とりあえずあなたたちの話を信じることにする。だからあなたたちも私に信じさせるよう協力して。分かった。
There was no hesitation in her voice.
ありがとう。
If Suzuha said it was okay, it wasn't my place to speak. If Maho was going to help, that was all that mattered.
話をかがりの件に戻そう。さっきも言ったようにはぐれたのは彼女が10歳の頃。そしてそれ以降先月になって見つかるまでの足取りは全くつかめていない。俺はその間彼女が海外にいたんじゃないかと考えている。
For how long, I had no way of knowing. It may have been the whole time, or perhaps only a week.
オカリンおじさんの仮説だとビクトル・コンドリア大学にいたことになるね。
ああ。そして何らかの形でアマデウスと接触した。
The look on Maho's face was one between acceptance and resignation. She sighed loudly. A copy of Kurisu's memory data had been saved for use by Amadeus. This data was the only possible source for the memories within Kagari's head. Her words today had only strengthened my theory. Exchange program, lecture, these fragments of memories were all from before she'd come to Japan. The memory data had last been saved just before she'd come to America. That was another match.
この前レスキネン教授に確認してみたんだけど、クリスの記憶データは凍結されたまま誰もアクセスできないはずだと言っていたわ。ただそれが事実かどうかを確かめる権限は今の私にはない。それにプロジェクトが凍結される前に何者かがデータを持ち出したことだって考えられるし。
持ち出すことのできる人間はアマデウスの研究に携わっていた人間に限定されるんじゃないか。
そうとは限らない。外部からサーバーに侵入すれば誰にだってできることよ。
Anyone was an exaggeration. Your average person wouldn't have a clue. You'd have to be a super hacker.
問題は目的ね。岡部さんの仮説が正しいとしてなぜそんなことをする必要があったのか。
The most obvious possibility was that someone wanted access to Kurisu Makise's mind, but Amadeus should suffice for that. There was no need to move her memories into another person's brain. And why would they want her mind that badly anyway? She was a genius, sure, but she'd only published a single paper. There was no reason to think it would be that important to anyone. Unless...
もしクリスの記憶の中にタイムマシン理論の基礎があることを何者かが知ったとしたら
Someone out there would want it.
でもクリスがその理論に行き着いたのはあなたの言う別の世界線なんでしょ？
中鉢論文を知ってるか？
中鉢？それってロシアに亡命した？
そうだ。
例の論文には私も軽く目を通したけど、とても論文と言えるものではなかったわ。
あれは劣化コピーだと俺は考えている。オリジナルが別に存在するんだ。
一体何の話？
ドクター中鉢の本名は牧瀬正一。クリスの実の父だ。
I thought back to what I saw that day.
私も考えてみたの。タイムマシンは作れるのかどうか。読んでパパの意見を聞かせてほしい。
悪くない内容だ。
本当？この論文はパパと共同署名でもいいと私は思って。
学会には出すな。これは私が預かってるから。
Who is Kurisu's mom?
そういえば、クリスが日本に行く前に言ってたの。父親に会うって。新しい理論の発表会をするらしくて、その招待状が来たって。
That day, Nakabachi had stolen Kurisu's paper, and after he'd gone to Russia, he published his own paper. I hadn't seen it myself. Whenever I thought about it, I always thought about what I'd seen that day and what happened right after, so I'd been avoiding it. But I'd heard the professor at school talking about it. It was so terrible that it had become something of a running gag, but if it was just a bad copy of an original, if what had been published was just Nakabachi's own reinterpretation of Kurisu's theory and her original still existed somewhere else. That's right. Kurisu had written the original theory. It had to be better than that. She'd actually succeeded in making the time leap machine.
それじゃあ、その論文の存在を知った誰かがクリスの記憶からタイムマシンに関する理論を取り出そうとしてるってこと？第三次世界大戦が起きたきっかけは EU とロシアによるタイムマシン競争の過熱なんだ。そこにアメリカまで横槍を入れて収拾がつかなくなった。まさに時代は歴史通りに動き出している。
Those people had attacked the lab in the last world line. Tenoji had said they weren't Japanese, but they were military. Some military wanted Kurisu's time machine theory. That would explain why they chose to download her memories into Kagari's mind. Here again? Oh, Lukaku? Amadeus would never talk about something that it didn't want to talk about. But what about a human? There were truth serums and torture methods. A human could be forced to talk, maybe. Maybe they'd done that to Kagari. But of course, this was just a guess. But if it was a military that had tried to kidnap Kagari, it was quite possible.
記憶のデータを脳に移植する。
可能なんだろう。
Okay.
今の技術でもクリスはそれを成し遂げた。それはクリスが研究していたことの応用だと言っていた。
ええ、そうね。可能よ。それにもともとアマデウスはそのために作られたものなんだし。
Medical applications, wasn't it? Leskinen had talked about it at the seminar, and Maho had interpreted. In this world line, Amadeus had been shut down, and the seminar had never happened, though. Maho gave me the same explanation I've heard before. I was right, and memory data transplants were theoretically possible.
クリスの考え出したタイムリープマシンだってその応用だわ。
もっとも、そのどちらも自分の頭の中に自分の記憶を移植するという目的で作られたものだがな。
And Kurisu had said that even that was dangerous.
他人の脳に別人の記憶を移植するとどうなる？単純に OS の違う PC のハードディスクに別のデータをコピーというわけにはいかないと思う。そもそも 人間の脳のキャパシティがどれくらいあるのかすら分かっていないの。容量的なことだけを言えば、20歳の女性2人分の記憶くらいは余裕で保存できるというデータはあるけど。
Dara had once told me that the brain storage capacity was 3.24 terabytes.
問題はそれ以外の部分。岡部さんの言う通り、自分自身の頭に記憶をダウンロードすることすらまだ実用段階には至っていない。それなのに他人の記憶をとなると、いつ齟齬を起こしてもおかしくないわ。そして実際に今そのエラーは起きつつある。このまま放っておくとカガリはどうなる？ひょっとしてマキセ・クリスになってしまうのか。記憶と人格は別物よ。脳の中で記憶を扱うのは海馬と大脳皮質。一方で人格は前頭前野の働きによって形成されている。それらの働きはお互い密接につながっている部分も大きいわ。
Different parts of the brain had different functions, but they weren't completely independent. Memories probably played a large role in forming your personality.
2つの記憶が混在することで脳に対する負担もかなり大きくなってるはず。このまま放っておいた場合、最悪カガリさんの人格は崩壊よ。
This is a lot. This is a whole lot. Susan slammed her fist into her knees in
それを
frustration.
防ぐ手立てはあると思うか。
カガリさんの頭の
A lot
中から
of
ク
information.
リスの記憶を取り除くしかないでしょうね。
できそうか。
脳のデータが解析できれば、あるいはでもできるようになるとしても何年先か。
Suza's fists were clenched so tightly I could almost hear the sound. I could tell she was blaming herself for letting Kagari run away.
一つ手があるとするなら、もう一度過去のカガリさんの記憶を上書きすることかしら。
もう一度記憶を。
そもそもカガリさんの記憶を操作した人間はカガリさんの記憶を残すつもりはなかったと思うの。
She might have been right. Putting two sets of memories in one mind was just asking for problems, which means that the experiments they'd done on her had resulted in a different outcome than they'd intended. In a sense, they had failed.
だったらもう一度カガリさんの記憶をきちんとした装置で脳に上書きしてあげれば、あるいは元通りにできるかもしれない。
しかしそのためにはカガリの記憶データがないと。
バックアップが取ってあることを期待するしかないわね。装置はどうする？簡単に見つかればいいけど。ないなら作ればいいわ。
そんな簡単に。
でもクリスは作れたんでしょ？
え？
Oh, right. It had to work similarly to the time loop machine.
だったら私にも作れる。作ってみせる。
I might be able to help with that.
問題は記憶データがどこにあるかね。こればっかりは何とかして突き止めるしか方法がないわ。
But there simply wasn't enough information. All we knew was that it was a non-Japanese Western military, and that information wasn't solid either. If anyone held the key, it was the woman in the motorcycle suit. I thought of a name and quickly brushed it from my mind.
何かいい方法でも思いついた？
いや、なんでもない。
It wasn't Yuki Yamane. It couldn't be. We talked late into the night trying to come up with a way to find out who had done the experiments on Kagari. But even though we'd spent a lot of time on it, none of us had any good ideas. That was so much, jeez.
でも本当なのよね。
On the train back, Mahu Hiyasha was having trouble controlling her excitement. Two girls who said they came from the future, and Rintarou Kabe's story about the time loop machine. Normally, she'd never believe them, but if Kurisu Makise's mind had made these things possible, she could accept them. Kurisu was a genius. She just might be capable of it. To Maho, Kurisu seemed capable of anything. And most of all, she'd seen it for herself. On the way back from the lab, Suzu had taken her to the top of the radio building and showed her a real time machine. It was night, and she didn't have a lot of time to look at it closely, but she could tell at a glance that it wasn't made with modern technology. Honestly, she wanted to start work on making another one tomorrow. No, right now even. But she had something to do first. The time loop machine that Kurisu had made. She needed to make an improved version. That meant she was going to be practically living at Okabe's lab for a while. So she decided to get what she needed from the office in Wako City. From outside the building, she could see that the lights were still on despite the late hour. As soon as she got inside, Dr. Leskinen rushed over, his face pale. The room had clearly been ransacked. Of course, the place barely had anything in it to begin with, so with a quick glance it was hard to see what had changed. But Milo and Dr. Leskinen's desks had clearly been searched. The drawers had been locked, but the locks had been broken and their contents spilled out. Dr. Reyes hadn't brought much of anything, fortunately, and so she just gave with very little damage, but her drawers had been dumped out too. Wouldn't it make more sense to hit the Riken Institute next door? Only a few people even knew this office existed to begin with. Suddenly Okabe's words began to take on a new meaning for her. Could this have something to do with what he'd said? Was a secret war over the time machine already beginning? She checked the desk and the drawers and couldn't find a single thing missing.
PC の中も確かめてみたが、第三者にアクセスされた形跡は見られない。本当に何も取られてないかい？はい。そういえば魔法、君のノー PC はどうした？もしかして盗まれたんじゃないか？あれならホテルに置いてあるから大丈夫です。そうか。ならいいんだが。どうする？警察に連絡する？何も取られていないなら。ことを荒立てる必要はないのかもしれないな。そうね。少し様子を見ましょうか。
Ma wasn't sure that was a good idea, but she could understand that going to the police would be a big hassle, especially since they weren't Japanese to begin with. And more than anything, Dr. Leskinen probably didn't want to lose time that could be spent on research. The same was true of Maho, too.
教授。実はお願いがあるんです。
Dr. Leskinen agreed to give her a vacation much more readily than she expected. Maybe coming to the office over New Year's had paid off. Now she'd be able to focus on the time loop machine. Once she got back to her hotel room, she quickly got her things ready. She wasn't checking out of the hotel, but she needed clothes and other things so she could stay at the lab for a while.
よし。あとは。
Once she finished packing her bag, she grabbed another bag that was placed next to it. It was a laptop and portable hard drive that she'd gotten from Kurisu's mother after her death. She tried many times to crack the password, but never managed to succeed. She knew that she wouldn't have time to do anything with it, but she still didn't want to leave it here.
そうだわ。確か彼。
After she made one last check of her things and got ready to leave the room, an idea came to her. Not a bad idea if I do say so myself. Maybe this is what Kurisu wanted? She quickly shook her head and chased the idea from her mind. Kurisu would get mad at her. Life and death were like a binary 0 and 1. You could be one or the other. There was no will that existed after death. If it existed at all, it existed inside the brain. Several days passed, and I still had no idea who had planted the memories in Kagari's head. I went all the way out to talk to the priest who found her, and even questioned the locals in the surrounding area, but I had no luck. Suzuka seemed to be doing her own research. She hadn't been back to the lab since then. She was in touch with Daru at regular intervals, so I didn't think she was in danger. I asked Tanoji and Moika again, but neither of them seemed to have any luck. In this world line, the lab hadn't even been attacked, which meant they might be up to something else. Even if they were, I had no way of even imagining what it was. But I was sure that someone had kidnapped a young Kagari Sina and experimented on her, and only recently had she escaped. They had to be planning something, and I was sure it was bad. We didn't have time to wait for them to act. But without any clues, there was nothing we could do. My mind kept going in circles, and I kept getting more frustrated and nervous with every minute.
すみません、真帆先輩。私のために。あと少しでできそうだから。
Go, Maho.
それに、これは私のためでもあるんだし。
Maho staggered out of the development room, sank into the sofa, and smiled sleepily. There were dark spots under her eyes. For the last few days, she'd been working on the device without any sleep. Her work needed to pay off soon, as fast as possible.
それにしても、携帯電話を使うだなんて普通考えないわ。たとえ考えついたとしても、実行に移そうなんて思わない。
携帯は話すときにどうしても受話器をこめかみ
You
付近
can
に近づ
do
け
it,
る必要がある
Maho.
からな。
こめかみ周辺には大脳前頭葉と大脳側頭葉がありますからね。側頭葉の海馬妨害が記憶を貯蓄する場所だと考えると妥当な判断かと。問題はどうやって記憶を圧縮させるかよね。
This girl's working so hard to do this. You can do it, Maho. Go, Maho. To compress the memories, we needed CERN's LHC no matter what. That one took a lot of thought. If we made an enemy out of CERN, that tragedy I'd gone through before would repeat. But the main reason that CERN had attacked us was the emails we'd sent to the past. If it weren't for that, they probably wouldn't have bothered. And since we weren't sending emails, CERN would probably never even detect us. Probably. Fortunately, Suzo had the IBM 5100 that we needed for the hack. Things were coming together better than I expected. I nodded at Daru. For the past few days, more of Kurisu's memories have been invading Kagari's mind. Lately, she'd even started discussing complex technical subjects with Maho. She was acting just like Kurisu used to when she lived in America. At first, Maho seemed put off, but she eventually adapted. Maho probably wanted to get details about the device from Kurisu, so it seemed to be helping.
それにしても、こんなラボで本当にタイムリープマシンを作ってたなんて、実際にタイムマシンを目にした今でも信じられない。
I know, right?
人間の記憶を丸ごとデータ化して過去に飛ばすなんて発想はすごいですよね。さすがは真帆先輩。その言葉。
This technology is so fascinating, so cool.
あなたは天才で、所詮私はサリエリだったってことよ。
Watching the two of them, it was easy to fool myself into thinking that it was Maho and Kurisu talking.
なあ、Kagari。
そうだ、アマデウスで思い出しましたけど、プロジェクトはどうなってるんですか？残念ながら凍結されたわ。
Kagari。
凍結？どうして？もしかしてレスキネン教授が決めたんですか？私にもわからないわ。教授はもっと上からの指示だって言ってたけど。そんな、せっかく順調に言ってたのに。
なあ、クリス。
はい？あれ？私、今。
君はカガリ。シーナ・カガリだよな。
シーナ・カガリ。そう。私はシーナ・カガリ。私は。
Kagari suddenly put her hands up to her head, afraid.
でも、それじゃあ、これは。この頭の中にある記憶は何？
それはマキセ・クリスの記憶だ。君の記憶じゃない。
そんなこと言われてもわかんないよ。
Kagari was acting completely different now than she was just a moment ago with Maho. She raised her voice like a child throwing a tantrum.
だって私にとっては私の記憶でしかないんだもん。マユリママたちとの記憶も 子供の頃のパパとの記憶もアメリカの大学での出来事も全部私の中にあるんだもん。どれが本当でどれが嘘かなんて私わかんないよ。
Her words turned to sobs. I could understand how she felt. From her perspective, it was all real. None of it was fake. It was easy to tell her to get a hold of herself, but it wasn't that easy for her to actually do it. I remembered what Kurisu had said when she'd finished the time loop machine. She'd said you could never put your memories inside someone else's mind. It would destroy their personality. But just if we were to leave Kagari like this, what would happen? There was a chance that her own memories would disappear and only Kurisu's would remain. If that happened, who would the person in front of me become? Would they be Kagari, or would they be Kurisu? If it was Kurisu, that wasn't true. It was impossible. I couldn't even think about it. But the more I thought, the more I felt a horrible idea tugging at my mind, no matter how much I tried to ignore it.
私どうしたらいいの？助けて、ママ、パパ。
It would have been great if Mayuri was around, but unfortunately both she and Wakako had gone to school. Both of them were worried about Kagari and had told me to contact them if anything came up, but that didn't mean I could rely on them all the time.
Kagari-tan, ちょっと気分転換に散歩でもしてきたらどう？
そうね。人間じっとしてると余計なこと考えちゃうものよ。少しくらい体を動かした方がいいかもしれないわね。
というわけでオカリン、Kagari-tanを頼んだ。
わかった。
The two of us walked down the central street together, but we didn't really have anything to do. The air outside must have made her feel a little better, because Kagari was starting to calm down.
そのどこか行きたいところあるかな？
どこでもいいの？
ああ、君の行きたいところでいい。
それじゃあクリスさんと行ったところに連れてってほしい。
え？
オカリンさんがクリスさんと歩いたことのある場所に連れて行って。
Somewhere I'd been with Kurisu. Where could that be? The coin laundry in the neighborhood? Horan Park? Gyudon Samba? I hadn't spent a lot of time with her at fun or romantic places. I'd spent a lot of time with her, but most of it had disappeared into many different world lines. I'd gone through that time again and again, but most of it had been spent arguing with and working with her at the lab. We'd never spent any time going places to have fun, and we'd never made it to El Mori
オカリ
either.
ンさんがクリスさんと初めて会ったのはどこ？
初めて会った場所。
私そこに行きたい。
The place where Kurisu and I had met, it was...
ここが？
A brightly colored building in front of a Akihabara station, the radio building. This was where it started. Yes, this is where everything had begun. On that day, the time machine appeared on the roof of the building. It was just after that when I met Kurisu. I could still remember it, the challenging look in her eyes. Thinking back, I may have already fallen in love with her then. But even though this was the place I'd met her, this was also the place where I'd...
オカリンさん、どうしたの？
すまない。
Lately, I've been so busy with Kagari that I started to think I was getting a little better, but maybe I wasn't.
汗すごい。ごめん。もしかして私のせい？
いや、そうじゃないんだ。ただ、
Whenever I came here, I couldn't help but remember what happened that day. But
行こう。
いいの？具合悪いんでしょ？
大丈夫だ。
I couldn't just stand out here forever. I couldn't keep Mayuri, Daru, and the others worrying forever. If I needed to get over it at some point, then
わかった。それじゃ行こう。
something soft touched my hand. Kagari was holding my hand tightly in hers.
ありがとう。
Kagari led me down the bustling street toward the radio building. My knees felt like they were about to give out at any second. Even after I'd gone inside, I was still doing better than I had thought I would. But I still didn't feel like climbing the stairs where it had happened. We took the elevator to the roof. Ferris, Rubio, Akia had carefully locked the door to the roof so that no one who wasn't authorized could enter. I'd been given a key too, but today was the first time I was able to use it. The first thing I saw after coming onto the roof was a strangely shaped object, the time machine.
懐かしい。これこれ。私これに乗ってきたんだよ。
Kagari happily ran up to the time machine. It was right after she'd separated from Suzuha that she'd lost her memories. She remembered going from the future to this place in 1975.
初めてこのビルの上に降りた時にね、お空がすっごく綺麗でびっくりしたの。
Unfortunately, it wasn't very pretty right now, but Kagari spoke as if there was an endless blue sky stretching out in front of us.
私、ママと別れるのが嫌で、ずっとこのマシンの中で泣いてた。ママに会いたいよって。そんなことじゃダメだ。いつまでも泣くんじゃないって鈴葉お姉ちゃんに言われて、それでも悲しくて、そんな時に開いたハッチの外に見えたのが青い空だったの。
2036年の空は青くないのか？
うん、戦争の影響でね、ずっと黒くて暗い空。それに外にもなかなか出してもらえないし。
The mid-70s were right after the big economic growth spurt. Ecological concerns weren't as important as they are now. That was also when air pollution was a really big deal. The air probably wasn't as clean as it is now. If it seemed beautiful to her anyway, that must have meant the air in the future was really terrible.
オカリンさんはここでクリスさんと初めて会ったの？
いや、ここじゃない。ここは。
お。
A cold drop hit my nose.
降ってきちゃった。
ああ、そうだな。
That's right.
岡部か。
生きてたか。
そっか。ここだとあんたと会っちゃう可能性があること忘れてた。
何をしていたんだ？
考え事。
そうか。
The rain had been falling then too. When she'd learned that either she or Mayuri was fated to die, she'd come here and looked up at the sky like this.
すごい降ってきたよ。オカリンさん、中に。オカリンさん。
What had she been thinking then, when she'd entrusted her fate to another person, to
オ
me?
カリンさんったら、このままじゃ風邪ひいちゃうよ。早くこっちに。
Catch it cold. A catch cold. Kagari dragged me inside away from the noise of the falling rain. A few moments later, I found myself sitting there. The place was being renovated and none of the stores were open. The lights were off too, and it made the place seem very gloomy.
びっくり。
That day, after the rain, Kurisu and I had leaned up against each other and talked. And this was also the place where...
ここだよ。ここが俺とクリスが初めて会った場所だ。
Strictly speaking, this is where I first met her in the Beta World line. That day, half a year ago.
さっき私に何を言おうとしたんですか？
さっきとはいつのことだ？
ほんの15分くらい前、会見が始まる前に私に何か言おうとしましたよね。すごく悲しそうな顔をして、まるで今にも泣き出しそうで、それにすごく辛そうでした。どうして？私、前にあなたと会ったことありますか？
Mm-hmm.